Let me formally say thank you all for coming along on this lovely rainy day. Welcome to Ragged University. For those who haven't been before, Ragged University is a project where we find people who love what they do, share their knowledge in social spaces like pubs, cafes and libraries. And it's inspired by the Ragged Schools movement. So before free education, people came together in communities, shared their knowledge for free. And about 15 years ago, me and three of my friends in London thought it would be nice to do that. And like we tried it out, and it was something that people really enjoyed, and I enjoyed. And I started to realise it's an amazing way to learn, because when you just ask the world to tell you what really makes them passionate, you're taken into so many different journeys, so many different worlds. So as far as my education has gone, it's really been unpredictable and been something that I've flourished from. So tonight is the first night that we're reopening after COVID. And it's been a long time since we've done a public event in Manchester. So thanks to Gulliver's and Johnny Booth for giving us this space. And tonight I'm going to take you on a journey that I've been digging around. I hope it's going to be an enjoyable romp through history and ideas associated with the word love. So, what is in the word? Love is a word that's universally evoked. It's so natural to us, and I've been thinking about this. So the words may seem so simple to say, but they're very hard to describe. And one of the ways I realise the complexity and the complexity of words is, can anybody think of a way of articulating left without using the word left? You know, as a concept, we're all familiar about it, but I spent a whole month asking lots of people, and the closest I found was a former submariner who gave me a heuristic, and he said, well, when you hold your hands out like this, the one that shows an L is your left. But it sort of took me into the complexity of the language and what's indigenous, what's native to us. So it can be so familiar to people of all ages, but very hard to pin down. Now tonight, I don't think I'm going to pin it down, but I am going to show you some of the things that I've been exploring. And before we go further, I'd like to ask you think of a time when you were a child and used the word love or thought the word love. And I'd like to hear some descriptions of what those experiences are, if that's anyone?
Protection, security,
protection, security,
adoration,
Family home.
fine,
The family home.
family home,
I mean, as a teenager, who knows what it means? So, things are firing off all over the place, aren't they? Just over association there. You wonder what it's driven by, you know, hormones or meaning.
you know.
Oh, as a teenager, it might have been self-love as well.
Yeah.
You know, wanting to be appreciated, to be recognized, to be famous or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
The third decade's not doing very well here, is it?
People come to mind in different faces, and like I remember I had an Aunt Lily. I absolutely loved her, but I also loved the ice cream sodas she used to make. She still permeates my memory. She still makes me think of the 1920s, and she had a glass eye, and she used to make me laugh by popping it out with the spoke of her glasses. I'd fall about laughing. But she was always very entertaining. So yeah, I'm going to read this. This I wrote for a conference that was on various aspects of mental health, and so I thought I'd write, do a presentation on love and madness, but that made me think about different aspects of what both love and madness means. Solange, l'odeur de peu, le parfum mêlé à la peu. In her wake I walk, a million anemone blooms, windflowers born in the light and taken by the frost. Never-ending circles, never-ceasing feelings, Nocien, unrequited knowledge, a sailor leapt from their ship, a paradox completed, homeless on Church Street, Larisienne. The coup de foudre, struck dumbfounded from any previous sense, alive with a want, a vision in the distance of a completeness so compelling in its nature that it readily abolishes all drive for food or housing or wealth. Limerence, to long for, to think about, to have every moment filled with an absent presence, a hunger never sated, a desire never drawn to the lips nor eye, nor the limb or heart, the madness of love, an eternal presence in the mortal mind, requiring of rest, of sleep, of stupor, the blindness of love, to see nothing else, a single star in a total darkness, a mouth gazing adoringly into the eyes of a cat, a volcanologist besotted with the speed and magnificence of pyroclastic flows. Love, the feeling to light up the synesthete to another life somewhere else, finer than heroin, more brilliant than cocaine, more radiant than the sun, sweeter than honey. So what is said of love? What happens when your heart breaks and splits the last cup you have? Left of that thing which made you feel alive, most at home, that person missing in vital moments, who was there as if an eternal echo. What in medicine has expressed the ailment that comes upon the soul when longing eclipses the everyday? What medical knowledge attends to the significant absence which makes voluntary death more tolerable for some? What earthly accounts are there of the hole left by a missing child, such that each day is seen through weary eyes as a ghost stood in the light of the living, to look on and nurse to the breast a pain as if it were a stone sown therein and left unhealed. And in each turn of the day, seeing the lives of others, what would have been, what should have been, what is wanted still in the guilt of the impossible. What breaks the heart more open than standing among those who you thought you were of, to discover you were the shadow cast behind them. So I wanted to use some prose and poetry to evoke some of the thoughts that I was thinking about Robert Ferguson, who is buried off the High Street in Edinburgh, in a grave that was paid for by Robert Louis Stevenson and Robert Burns. And it says he died of melancholia. And really I was trying to think my way into, again, the power of love in people's lives. So, picking up on some of the historical associations with love, the words that which ancient Greek cultures developed, I'm by no means a linguist. In fact, I only speak poor English. But I have found several which I've been chipping into with my library researches. I am quite interested to hear from people who speak languages other than English some of the words that are used to express love, if anyone.
I think a good example for me, it's still English. I read recently Julian of Norwich's Revelations of Divine Love. She was a 14th century anchoress, so she was in tombs to engage in mystical contemplation. And she writes this text about God's love and the nature of God as being a fundamentally loving being. And the thing that really stood out to me was the use of charity and love synonymously. And you have agape on the wall, which is that sort of charitable loving. But it was so interesting to see how she used them almost synonymously and how there was sort of that overlap. And that's a word which obviously continues to exist in English today, but we wouldn't necessarily associate it with an emotional thing, it's an activity. But she talks about feeling charity and God as an emotional, charitable being. And that really stood out to me. That was very interesting.
They're a little bit blurred, the lines under the words.
Yes.
Can you read the agape one?
I shall be taking you through those one by one, but on this graphic that I magpied, it says love of Love of humanity and contributing.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
I was reminded by what you were saying, something very different. The word agape appears again and again in the writings of Philip K. Dick, the science fiction writer, who had all kinds of, you might say delusions, but he had visions of other places, visions of this world as being something, it could be something different from what it seems to be, and that's what happens in Philip K. Dick all the time. Suddenly there's a moment where the characters discover this is not how things are, it's something else. And agape is there evoked again and again in his writings about something beyond which draws you in and which you feel kind of beholden to.
Yeah, that's very interesting because it makes me think about the history of that idea, because agape starts in pre-Christian Greek philosophy as that sort of charitable loving, and then as they become Christianized, it becomes the love that's almost exclusively for God or from God. And then I think we're going through this process, especially science fiction authors, Philip K. Dick, of rediscovering what charity is, what does love mean in a sort of post-religious setting. And I'm sure we'll get to it today, but love is very religious historically. So it's interesting to hear that word used in that context as well.
Yeah, there's a moment where he, quite late on, where he converts to Christianity. Something's been kind of playing with the idea for a long time. This is in his own life, and he goes to the church where he's confirmed. We went to the church in California. A very bizarre church. And at that moment, the moment he was confirmed, he thought, no, this is wrong. There's something else. There's something else. It's interesting. A gap. Agape makes me think of gap all the time.
Yeah.
Now, when I see the word, because of that writing.
There isn't desire up there, but the gap would be something.
Where are we posting love that is not reciprocal? Argue a spiritual love somebody may see or believe that, but it's not reciprocal.
There is certainly some saints who think about agape love and they define it as being the love you give without any expectation of reciprocation. So it's like charity you give, and the love is the feeling you get through giving, and then it becomes charity in the
It's that reaching your narcissistic need.
Yeah.
Has anybody come across the word limerence?
Say it again.
Limerence.
Limerence.
Yes, Limerence. Limerence.
As in liminal.
Not liminal. Limerence.
Isn't it to define like a really passionate love, an all-consuming love?
Yes, but it's an impossible love. It's a love that can never be. It's an all-consuming fixation that for fiction or that is not to be realized.
At what point does a feeling become love? Because you could say, that person is nice. Is that love? Or does it need to be, I really like that person? Is that the beginning of love?
Well,
How do we define that?
I think doing this research and rootling around in the different thinkers and writers and ideas and the ways that it's been used has helped me think about the aspects of the word and how it's used. It can be used and how it is useful.
In relation to your point, Pascal, because I'm thinking about Latin languages, so French is a friend is an ami, a lover is an amant.
There are relationship in the words.
So there's a really, really strong, so coming back to that question, what differentiates a friend from a lover? when they're so closely related in a root, which is interesting.
And that's so interesting. The relationship, the noun already has the relationship named in it. That's yeah. I was thinking. I just read it was one of the Booker novels quite recently called Enlightenment. That's all about different kinds of love, but it's very Christian. It's all, I mean, explicitly about some versions of Christianity, and I'm Jewish by background, so I'm also thinking that Christianity is a religion kind of constituted around love, isn't it? And you could say that Judaism is more around fear, God's punishing you. And so there's the structure of the relationship is a bit different, but I'm wondering where the relationships are in, and what's an individual relation, or are they specified as, is it one body or entity to one another, or is it there are those collective forms of love and community and connection and belonging and stuff like that?
Going to go on a little bit of a tour through each of these, and I think that there are definitely expressions of collective. I'm going to start with eros, which is commonly associated with sexual desire. Cupid and Psyche is a story from the Metamorphosis, also called the Golden Ass, written in the 2nd century AD by Lucius Apuleius Madorinus. Sorry, my pronunciation is terrible. Platonicus. Apuleius was a Numidian Latin prose writer, and he was of Berber culture, as was Augustine of Hippo, which I found out recently. It was written, I read this actually many years ago.
St. Augustine.
St. Augustine was a Berber.
That's Berber.
Yeah.
Good heavens. So,
It, like really, it is, confessions are really interesting, because you also read what he was reading. So he was reading Cicero, and he was stealing pears from orchards, and it was very, very interesting figure. So, so the tale of Cupid and Psyche. Now, Apuleius, as far as I'm aware, he actually married someone in Greece, and so he migrated, and I think that might have had a bearing on his writing. The tale is actually about overcoming the obstacles of love, and Psyche comes from the meaning soul or breath of life, and Cupid from the Latin cupido, meaning desire, or amor, meaning love, and the story is ultimately about a sacred marriage. So the eros and erotic can be reduced to the profane so easily, and modernity, I think, does this quick to hand. And to
Story. Do you want interruptions? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
You should tell us to shut up.
No, it's.
I was thinking because Psyche,
Or Ragged Unit?
No. Wait for the music.
I always think it's funny because this picture of Psyche is a symbol of on the Psychologists, the magazine of the Psychological Society that they're supposed to members.
she's already in career, isn't she?
Well,
It looks like she's always.
it looks like she's ordinary. But isn't the story, I might forget it, but the story's something like she this lover visits her at night so she can't see him.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the end, she has this consuming desire to see this wonderful lover that she's so passionate about. And then what happens? It all falls apart because she sees him fall down or something, and that's her punishment. But and then I can't. So it always seemed to me quite a paradoxical thing. This is the symbol of psychology.
Yes, she's transported to and I'm here for the conversation, by the way. I'm here to actually learn from the room. That if I remember correctly, so it's a beautiful story. Eros has fallen in love with Psyche, and each night she is transported to this magical cave.
Okay.
And then returns, and her sisters are regaled with this the surprise, because she was terrified at first of this monster that was invisible, and they basically convince her you must. This is a monster. You must kill the monster. And when he's sleeping one night, she lifts the oil lamp to see him, whereupon she sees this lovely figure of Eros, and is shocked because he's lovely. I'm not a monster, and he wakes up and is shocked, and she spills the hot oil, and it burns him, and he very nearly dies from it. It is then a story where they reconcile over time, but that's why the oil lamp.
Okay, well, that's even more interesting. It's like the damage that psychological knowledge does, isn't it? Those of us who are in the business, so.
It's a lovely story woven into. I think it starts off with this person who decides that they want to have magical powers, and so does some magic and turns himself into a donkey as a result. And this is part of the whole journey of the narrative arc of the Tale of the Golden Ass. So yes, highly recommended as a beautiful story. Robert Graves tunes into in his Greek myths, which is still regarded by many as one of the best scholarly accounts of the Greek myths. This is what he reports on Eros. He places it as a Homeric and Orphic creation myth. The Orphics say that black-winged Night, a goddess of whom even Zeus stands in awe, was counted by the wind and laid a silver egg in the womb of darkness, and that Eros, whom some called Phanes, was hatched from this egg and set the universe in motion. Eros was double-sexed and golden-winged, and having 4 heads, sometimes roared like a bull or a lion, sometimes hissed like a serpent, or bleated like a ram. Night, who named him Eryxipeus and Protogenes Phaethon, lived in a cave with him, displaying herself in triad, night, order, and justice. So again, pardon the terrible pronunciation, but it's quite a spectacular introduction of Eros, and not what I expected when I was opening the book. So yes, Eros as being involved in as a part of the creation myth.
Can I just comment on that first, the Orphic idea? You know, the idea that love is the sort of driving force in a way for everything that happens. That's quite bold statement, really, isn't it?
It's nice. Yeah.
I don't know. Is that just Eros that has that particular sort of storyline? Love as the instigator of motion in the universe.
Set the universe in motion. It's as far as I'm aware, but I'm no scholar of the Greek myths. But as you'll see as we go through some of the other sources that I've dug up, it's very interesting the importance and the importance that has been attributed to love, and it's a word and people's feelings. We're in an age where it's interestingly relegated to something rather profane, something that's sometimes base or sentimental or kitschified. But there's some very interesting views of love. As, for example, there are some professors who have proposed the foundation of law being in love. So I see it as fitting. If you see richness in the term, and it is something. It always is. It always spoken as something that moves us and guides our actions, and guides our actions in positive. It tends to be positive ways.
Well, you could say that. I'm thinking of like the Sarah Ahmed's queer phenomenology and so on, which you could say that like xenophobia is built from love, in a sense. Love is the one, you know, like we would think of that as being about hate, but it's also about the love of the country and, you know, patriotism and so on. So does love always stand in relation to its opposite?
Well, yeah, phobia and philia. Yeah, is love? Are there relative aspects to love? Well, there are some thinkers that we'll be tapping into, which try and try and reconcile these kind of values issues. Can it be love if it's an expression of hate, or brings about pain or negativity? So
may still be a kind of love that drives this. So hate, for example, might be a need to protect self from something. So that would be an expression of love towards self, wanting to protect oneself.
xenophobia may be that people have their identity is so based on something they feel is under threat, is under attack, that it leads them to negative behaviour. I think mania as another expression of love. speaks of this. An all-encompassing, feverish love, which drives people to hysterical responses, not as essentially responses that would bring about the thing that they want or desire in the world. But we'll find some sources on our journey.
I think that just thinking about Eros's movement, I think you'll find that in Freud and psychoanalysis, and often the way that it's represented is that Freud is simply talking about sexual love, and when he's talking about Eros, it's simply about sexuality. But for Freud, Eros was much more than that. Eros was about movement itself, the movement to connect with others and build relationships. And then
It's the life force.
yes, there's a life force, exactly, something like that. And then when it becomes turned in on the self or in the group that you're part of against another group, as in xenophobia, that would be a kind of narcissistic perversion of it. It wouldn't be what the love is as such, which is what he was so concerned with.
It is it's a beautiful expression. Eros, erotic. It's that's an interesting account of Freud. I've not read enough to see the deeper aspects that he's associated with his work.
It makes me think of the founder of the Surrealist movement, André Breton, who was a French philosopher. And in his book Nagia, it finishes on a really lovely quote. And he describes it in terms of beauty, but I think you can read it as love as well. And he says, beauty shall be convulsive or it shall not be at all. And he talks about, the whole book's about him meeting this woman and he's deeply in love with her immediately. And he loves everything about her. And then the more he gets to know her, he realizes why she is the way she is. And the more he understands her, the less attracted he is to her. And then he ends just kind of like saying, I don't like you anymore. And his whole philosophy is that that automatic reaction to something, you don't understand it, you don't grasp it, but it's that feeling, that automaticness that drives you forward. The more we try and grow onto things, and the more that feeling translates into something in the world, the less appealing it is. Which is quite a cynical take on love. But I think the idea that it is a convulsive thing, it's an automatic thing that can take you to lots of different places, it's a really interesting one.
Or is he arguing then that you shouldn't try analysing it too much?
That's the, yeah. He had lots of affairs, so tracks, yeah.
And fascinated with psychoanalysis he was.
Yeah.
Freud thought he was completely balmy.
Yeah. I didn't know they encountered each other.
He travelled to meet Freud and very disappointed.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine why. I have no idea. No.
No? He was in Mexico.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He did go to Mexico and he wrote a manifesto for surrealist revolutionary art, jointly with Trotsky. Actually, it was Trotsky who wrote it.
Yeah, I didn't know that connection. I must do it's more the art stuff. I love to read into his politics.
Well, move to a next expression of love was a storage. I would gather it's pronounced something similar. Devoted love or fondness. Storge or familiar love refers to natural or instinctual affection, such as love of a parent towards offspring, and vice versa. And this is encountered in Christian literature a lot, but it's found in terms of compound words. So usually compounded with this is an example of filial, brotherly love, is compounded with storge, which is familial affection, to make storgos in Romans 12. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. I did get a Greek English lexicon and found myself immediately out of my depth. It's like another language. But it makes me realize how, wow, these pieces of writing have come through so many layers of translation, through so many renderings. And if we go back far enough, they were written in consonantal form. So the history of written language has an interesting aspect that you'll see in a lot of languages points above and below the main script, and the pointing is the addition of vowels. So vowels in written form were later additions. So people would have written texts and they would be interpreted. So I developed an exercise to try and understand these ancient consonantal written forms. And if you take the word, the letters L and V, and then place consonants around those, you can see how many different ways you can interpret that. And the vowels were associated with the spoken word. So in Greek history, in mythology, each string of Apollo's lyre was a vowel sound, E, A, I, O, and the Homeric stories were set to rhythms and recounted by musicians, and they could use the beat and the rhythm to work out where they were in the Odyssey. But that's why you get different interpretations from the same written scripts. There's Rawlinson, there's a very good book called The Lost Languages that has a spectacular opening essay on the history of languages and how they evolved. I highly recommend. So yes, the way that the words are compounded, in this case it was Greek, and the use of storage an aspect of love that could be combined with other aspects of love.
But, you know, to hold you up, but I suppose I get very concerned with the ways in which there are assumptions that parents have to love their children and vice versa. And you know, and how demonized people are or feel if that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this word story. Never. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because if you think about the second sin in the Bible is the slaying of Abel by Cain. You know, that inability to reciprocate familial love becomes second to not reciprocating God's love. So that's quite interesting. It's, you know, even going back a few thousand years, it's big taboo.
Wow, that's brotherly.
Yeah,
Not parent to
yeah,
child.
that is true.
It's funny how it's very accepted, in Shakespeare, it's much more palatable to people, but when it's said in contexts like psychology, it becomes, it can be very shocking to people. To say, well, there's no love in this familial relationship. It threatens an archetype that society strongly protects, I think.
The murder of your children was common in dynastic disputes, right? About sort of who's going to be king and all this sort of thing. Like it was not common, but like it happens loads, right? Like so, you're right about the sort of Shakespeare. To kind of if you.
I recently read the personal letter of Medusa. What's it called? From the perspective of it was Medusa. No. Medea. Yeah. Driven to kill her children.
That play was so offensive to the Victorians that they entirely suppressed it. Some interesting writing on it. No, this is not the image of the family, particularly of woman, that has been carved out through the Victorian social project.
First of all, it's great, isn't it? Because you're drawn into kind of thinking, yeah, go on, I can see why you're going to do this. Go on, do it. It's very satisfying. Oh yeah, that's fun. Yeah, it's just me.
Your analysis.
I was thinking the way that love is compartmentalized in our culture, so that there are certain places where it must happen, like relation between parents and children, or between husband and wife. It must be there, right? Or there's something wrong. And then in other places, it mustn't happen, like relationship between men in an army or something like that, or it's suspicious. So it's kind of like becomes, compartmentalized is the word I think of, but separated out so that it becomes demanded, obligatory in some places. Or prohibited.
Very codified.
Yes.
Culturally.
Yeah.
That's actually quite interesting because I've started to read about Confucius and Confucian traditions. I'm only just starting, but the idea behind that very hierarchical society and relationship and how obedience must be there between, the children must obey their parents, the wife must obey the husband, the elder is always the one that dominates. So there's like almost an implication, an obligation of loving and respecting, but in a very hierarchical way. And I wonder, and I've not so far come across any other kind of love in that hierarchy.
I think it's just performative.
Here's an interesting one. Pragma. Care of duty is what I've used to express it. So pragma, which means deed, act, and concrete reality, thing of importance and matter at hand. So this is the Greek word that makes up pragmatism. And I dug into Charles Sanders' Peirce. I found it really interesting. And he describes his rendering of pragmatic philosophy as a certain axiom of logic. And it describes three modes of evolution have thus been brought before us. Evolution by fortuitous variation, evolution by mechanical necessity, and evolution by creative love. The doctrines, which represent these as severally of principal importance, we may term Tychasticism, Anastasticism, Agapistism. On the other hand, the mere propositions that absolute chance, mechanical necessity, and the law of love are severally operative in the cosmos may receive the names of Tychism, Ananism, and Agapism. All three modes of evolution are composed of the same general elements. Agapism exhibits them most clearly. So I found, again, love being involved in pragmatism. I had ideas of pragmatism as being very cold, sort of slightly instrumental, just realpolitik, let's pragmatically get through this. But Peirce really is talking about love as a force in the universe.
Yeah, I can zoom in on that a bit. I study biology and I study a lot of modern evolutionary theory. And there's a big process at the moment of redefining what evolution is. And one of the really interesting subjects is why cooperation is probably more prevalent in biology than competition. If we look at our own bodies, there's multiple cells that have cooperated at the point of being a single organism, which is quite mind-blowing. And a really interesting case study to think about is it's incredibly common for interspecies support and injury. So, animals can react to the cries of another animal and they'll help them. And that is very common across all different species. And the question is why? It's not just this sort of beautiful empathy. It's a really interesting question as to why that happens. And there's certain ideas that animals intuitively adapt to an ecosystem. So obviously that needs to remain in some sort of syncreticity. There's the idea that it can be reciprocated at a future point, so that the animals that help others are helped. It's reciprocated, and they form this sort of mutual social relationship. But fundamentally, we don't know, and obviously there has to be a pragmatic reason. It's not like spontaneously empathy just appears. It evolves, it becomes. So, yeah.
I have looked at altruism in ants. Altruism and education as an altruistic behaviour in ants. They gave a quite an articulate. The researchers gave a quite articulate measure of what altruism is.
Yeah.
That they didn't intrinsically benefit from these behaviours, but they observed these ants, the ants. Passing on knowledge that benefited the other ants. And that looking at that work, right, has helped me understand what we're referring to as education as a social behaviour.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to look at ants as well because it's an involuntary thing. They don't necessarily know that by educating their offspring that they'll be more likely to survive or that helps continue the species. It's pretty intuitive. Well, we don't know for sure. We can assume. Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
And Leonard Nimoy as Spock, what's he doing now?
A certain axiom of logic, pragmatism is logic as Peirce lays it out.
But there's all those kind of, subsequent versions of Star Trek that kind of sort of revealing backstories for TV watching, but that are fascinated with how Vulcans kind of arrived at this prioritization of logic as a way of managing these unmanageable feelings, etc. Yeah. But that's a human construction of this issue.
I thought it amusing to say, to be able to say, well, Spock is driven by love.
Yeah.
And that would be quite an enjoyable conversation to be had with a Vulcan. No,
I think he'd agree.
It's struggling, Ponfar. Everyone knows what Ponfar is. Ponfar is that time when the Vulcans are overcome with the need to mate. And filled with sexual desire. And it's agonising to Spock when he suffers time to Ponfar. It's really nerdy. But it's kind of like it is a place where we fill an image with what we know of love, isn't it? That's what we've got in Spock.
Yeah.
We haven't got him here, but we fill it with Spock with all this stuff.
It's like Joe, pick up your image.
Is it? Is it?
Yeah.
So on the thing about biology
Yeah.
and cooperation. So I just read T.H. White's The Sword and Stone, the Disney film is based on it. And a lot of that, I read it's an Arthurian thing.
Great film.
Yeah, and I haven't seen the film. The book was really weird. It was really surprising. Really surprising. Essentially, what happens in the plot of the book is that the young Arthur. That's a spoiler. Sorry. The young Arthur.
It turns out to be.
He is turned into a series of animals by Merlin throughout the entire. So he's turned into a fish. He's turned into a Merlin, the bird. He's turned into a goose. He's turned into all these animals. And his whole thing is you learn about kingship through talking to these animals. And there's this really long sequence where he engages with this goose, and he's asking the goose like, "Oh, why do your geese in your flock have sentries? Why do they have people watching out?" Is it because there's a war with the other geese? And this goose that he's befriended refuses to talk to him. It's like is disgusted by this thought that there could be a war between the same species. And it's like, no, there's nature. We're actually looking out for each other. So this kind of the thing that this is written. This is I think it's 1937 or something like that. It's quite old. This is the lesson that he gets from nature is that only and in fact there's a section where he gets to ants and ants two ant colonies have war, and the goose brings that up. It's like no, the only creatures that have wars are humans and ants, and it's only 5 types of ants. It's not all the different types of ants. And so the lessons from all these different things is that although there's obviously a lot of violence in nature, you cooperate, and as the king, you need to learn to cooperate among all these sort of species and take that kind of knowledge. So it's a really interesting sort of link with.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the dates it was written, because at the time, a lot of thinkers, like Peter Kropotkin was a famous Russian anarchist, he was saying that he was a biologist, and he said, all these animals get along. The idea that we're fundamentally combative creatures isn't evidence. And then you had, at the same time, in evolutionary sciences, something called the evolutionary synthesis, which was the first attempt after Darwin to sort of say, we've moved on a bit now, like what is the new field after Darwin? I mean, unfortunately now we still reference Darwin, we teach it in schools, but that was nearly 200 years ago. It's moved on a lot. And their big thing was emphasising altruism and getting away from the competitive nature of things. So that time period was a very sort of eco-socialist, wishy-washy period, which I like the wishy-washy.
It's so interesting because he also wrote books about raising, about falconry, about practical manuals about sort of falconry. So it's clearly very clearly, like I read it as a sort of post-World War I thing. Like you had this cataclysmic war, there's a big peace movement, people don't want another war, you're right in the aftermath of that, you want to code war as an unnatural thing. But that is that's very interesting that there's also that kind of link to it.
I mean, that conversation also takes you back to sort of animism, different perspectives from his view of the world. So, in some ways, I think that T.H. White was a bit of a strange character. I think he was a bit fascist.
Was he?
So, yeah, might be wrong, but I think so. But it always felt to me that he was plugging into sort of different traditions. So you've got like a Celtic tradition where you've got cauldron, where you transform, is it Gwion? Little Gwion, who is the Welsh version of Arthur, going through the cauldron and being transformed into different animals. So it's not just a 1937 story, it's sort of placed, you know, in different traditions, which even some that, you know, are concurrent now.
What is the thing that T.H. White picked it up from that tradition because he was Calvinistic?
I don't know. I think what I was saying is it's actually, you know, if you look at different traditions across the world, there will still be people who learn from animals in different ways. So it could be about, you know, the killing instinct of the jaguar, or it could be about the cooperation between ants. But that sort of reference to animals and learning from them, and you know how to use them as icons, and you know there's a whole sort of tradition that goes way back in time.
It's interesting you mention it because I mentioned Kropotkin, who was the Russian anarchist, and what made him get really involved in politics was he spent time with Siberian tribal people, and he basically just went away and said, like, these people are cooperating with each other. There's no conflict. It's where he came up with his concept of mutual aid, and he just looked at that and said, well, clearly it's possible, so why aren't we doing it? And then he brought all of his biological ideas together.
Plugging into a different tradition.
Yeah.
Slight deviation there.
No, not at all, not at all. Well, it speaks to biophilia.
Yeah.
You know, another expression of love. Kind of interested in how the advances in zoology, they sort of got past this, like, put these animals in an enclosure, here's some food, here's some cover, and more and more they found, oh wait a minute, they need company. You know, they need other species, they need to witness other species. And there's some really interesting where they're measuring glucocorticoids, stress hormones. And zoology has come so far, but it is now, I would argue, helping us understand about us as Homo sapiens in the living world. This is another one of the Greeks, although I think this is of a Latin root, ludus, called it playful of the moment. So John Allen Lee, in his Colours of Love, described it. Ludus could be summed up in the expression, love, like alcohol, should be enjoyed, but should not be allowed to become necessary. The ludic lover refuses to become dependent on any beloved, or allow any beloved to become overly attached to them. Other types of lovers will dismiss ludus as not a kind of loving at all, but merely a game. Moralists will condemn it as a subtle form of seduction. Erotic lovers will reject its promiscuity and lack of commitment. The believer in agape will attack ludus for its hedonism. Only the pragmatic lover will be tolerant of ludus, for pragma is a secondary of ludus. But even pragmatic love will hope to outgrow what it considers the emotional immaturity of ludic love. So,
is that flirtation?
Yeah, of flirtation, of the moment, sort of very passing, I'm guessing, and delighting in the there and now. How does everybody else imagine the ludic aspect of some people might not even regard it as an aspect of life?
It's really interesting because I haven't, but I think that's sort of spontaneous, the spontaneity, and otherwise that you get into duty, don't you? And that's a bit dreary.
So it's not only about spontaneity. I think, that first line is about not against attachment. And we live in a kind of patriarchal society where that is the epitome of love, that you are attached to somebody and that you are dependent on them, and that kind of codependence is like so important. And so I suppose, anything that is not, this is the opposite of that. It might not necessarily only be spontaneous, but it's that you're not dependent on that person.
Yeah, that's better articulation, yeah.
In the sense, like the same way with alcohol, you're not necessarily only being spontaneous with alcohol. You might have quite a consistent relationship with it, but you're not dependent on it, hopefully, if ideally, says this person.
Because you're pragmatic about it.
Maybe, yeah. But, yeah, or I don't know. I'm just saying, I guess this person's comparing it, that kind of love. If you tip over into being dependent on it, then that's actually bad for your health. Which I think a lot of kind of feminists and a lot of kind of neurodivergent people are trying to say, actually, that dependence we think is bad for our health.
But is flirtation enough?
No.
Are we talking about, is this the prequel, if you like, or we're trying to separate flirtation from love?
But I just don't think that what's on there is only about flirtation. It's just about the absence of dependence.
So their relationship could simply be flirtatious.
Sure, yeah.
It's not necessarily going to be consummated anyway.
No. But then, I don't know whether that's not or not.
Well, I think there's an interesting word to throw in, which would be trust. And I think there's a difference between a little bit of casual flirting and then taking it to that level where you say we both have an intention and trusting each other that you can sort of follow that direction. And that's maybe not a commitment or an attachment, but it is sort of a mutual understanding that you move towards. That's a little bit more than maybe a surface level casual interaction. Maybe it's something that can last a while, or maybe it's something which is more intuitive. One of my favourite Middle English poems is a poem called Lenten Is Come, and it starts off just talking about the joys of spring. Spring's coming in, and it's the birds singing and all the animals flying around, and it slowly descends into this very unusual for medieval literature, profound eroticism. And I'll quote the last few lines because it really, it's very unusual. He says, the worms are breeding underground and all the women in the town have put on airs and it's becoming of them. If I don't get my will of one, I'll run into the woods and never come back. And it's really nice to see in medieval literature, love isn't this commitment, it's not a sacred thing, it's the animals, it's the play, it's even the worms in the ground. And for him, that type of love is so important. Just run away if you can't get it as soon as possible. And I think that's quite a beautiful example of play and joy. It's a really sweet poem.
But there's hundreds of thousands of people who've been to see Justin Bieber for this moment where they're in a flirtatious relationship with somebody who's unobtainable, and he's not obtainable to them, but they're all enjoying the process.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, most pop stars, where would want a relationship with their audience, which would be potentially this. So it's quite often like.
But the way it's set up here is as if that flirtation is just a prelude to the kind of more stable things. It's a shame. Because I agree with you, that kind of flirtatious, playful aspect is so enjoyable. Yeah?
You could argue it's the flirtatious aspect is more enjoyable.
Yes.
It doesn't require attachment. And I think that's what makes it less enjoyable in societies. It comes with an attachment, a conversation that might have to happen. So it kind of really does need to set aside, and it's interesting to see that playfulness separated from what could otherwise be seen as something that has to be a part of the process.
There's a Queen track written by Brian May, which says, "Too much love will kill you." I think it's not very nice.
The next aspect of love, or a word for love, mania, obsessive love, mania meaning madness, frenzy, or inspired passion. And another quote from John Allen Lee and his Colours of Love. I hate and I love, and if you ask me how, I do not know. I only feel it, and I'm torn in two. So wailed the ancient Roman poet Catullus. His affliction was familiar to Greek and Roman civilization. The Greeks called it theomania, the madness from the gods. Both Sappho and Plato recorded its symptoms: agitation, sleeplessness, fever, loss of appetite, heartache. The manic lover is seized by the power of exclusiveness, so that his love centers on the beloved day and night. So, yes. I like how in the etymological term, inspired passion was also included, because mania is not necessarily negative. I think there are manic states that can be quite wonderful elations. And not necessarily irrational.
Yeah, that's true, because Cat has a poem, I think it's really nice. It's called Five, Cat has five, it's just like in the categorization. And it is like that sort of like, him and his partner, it's just you and me and nothing else matters. It's like that kind of, but it's in a very sort of, it's really beautiful actually, but it's in that sort of it's like, I guess it is mania, but it's like a kind of controlled sort of like mania that's actually like really kind of quite nice to sort of see. It's like, I love you. The old wise people in whatever sages, they disapprove of this, but we're not going to listen to them. We're just going to live our lives until we die, basically together. So it's, yeah, it can be done in a sort of kind of controlled sort of way, but it can be done in a sort of kind of like, yeah, quite devoted sort of way. It's not mania makes it seem crazy, right? Like, and this is like a mania that is crazy.
There's a lot of discussions about the way that medicine and psychiatry dismisses so many human states as, oh well, this is something that's gone wrong with you, and people are going, no, but I feel so much. It feels so apt, and no, we've got a pill for this.
Yeah, this is like people calling them crazy. I think there's a line which is like the sages are calling these two people their love crazy, but they don't think it's crazy. They think it's like a normal, beautiful thing. So it's kind of like there's a perspective thing to it there as well.
This is the next one is modern Greek, marake, and I've called it passionate care, from the Greek, meaning passion, care, and putting your heart into everything you do. Literally means essence of ourselves. And this is a picture of Sylvie Guillaume dancing, putting. It seems like such a you know, an image where she's so entirely of the dance, and I think that I've seen in a lot of people. I love seeing that in the world. Like when you see people lit up by what they do, that makes me scintillate too.
Can we stand that just for a moment?
Absolutely.
When Erica had a PhD student from India, I was involved in a PhD in some way as well, and she was doing work on kind of faith treatments in temples, which were kind of in conflict with the medical psychiatric way of understanding distress and strange states of mind. And we went with Saba to one of these temples. And one of the things that I witnessed was it was kind of getting towards evening, and there were a group of young women. They were standing alone, and I was watching one woman in particular. She had long hair, and she was in a absolutely crazy manic state. She was waving her head around. She was absolutely kind of like that, really mad. And it got to a certain time, and someone came up to her, who I assume was her partner, but I can't be sure, and tapped her on the shoulder and reminded her of the time. Oh, right, okay. Did up her hair, and off they went. So it was kind of like controlled space of mania. It was so interesting.
Like a rave.
Like, yeah, you could do that, you know? Or like when you're kind of completely smashed out of your head, and if you need to, you can pull yourself together and try. And then people say you can't do this, but you know what I mean.
But us also, when we went to another temple and people were writhing around on the floor,
Yes.
right? And,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
like all over the floor,
Yes.
you know, and, but there were some obstacles on the floor.
There were stone pillars, weren't there? Stone.
Nobody smashed their head against
No, weirdly, they rolled around and avoided them.
Yeah. So they weren't as out of it as
Yes.
it seemed.
Yes. Yes.
Very interesting.
The emotional state seems like it's such an important part of us. Like, there's a book here, Anne Cahill. I've not brought it into the presentation, but I think her work is absolutely wonderful. A big part, she's looking at dehumanization psychology, and gives a very helpful way of seeing where people are being instrumentalized. But she points out a huge deficit in Kant's work, and it is partly the bodily experience and partly the emotional experience. These are such an important part of our humanness. So, now, would you like to have a break or carry on just now? What time are we at?
Don't stop.
Okay.
It's like 20 past 8.
We're past it.
Nobody's got a watch.
Right. Okay. Well, if you want carry on, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, the next Greek word that was philautia, and this was mentioned earlier on, and self-love. I tuned into an interesting paper exploring this, and this is a little excerpt from it. Despite the prominent role of friendship, scholars usually neglect the concept of philautia, the friendship with oneself, or venturing to paraphrase this Aristotelian idea more loosely, the friendship one is due oneself. Frequently one says in everyday life that someone does not love himself, implying thereby that the way such individual acts or performs deeds is not proper of his person. This also implies that by not knowing how to love themselves, the said person is unable to love others, regardless of the recurrent character of this phenomenon. Only a few times is it explained what the grounds of a legitimate love to oneself are. And this is a scholar who's been looking deeply at Aristotle's work. And Aristotle has had a large influence, particularly in the Western world, partly because Aristotle's work was absorbed by the church, the Christian church, apart from his work on humour, which was apparently suppressed. Which that's the theme of Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. I heard one person, one scholar say his work on humour was regarded as the most toxic volume to the authority of the church. So it would be, if anybody's got a copy, yeah, I'll buy a photocopy. So yes, Aristotle's work is often cited to discuss philia and friendship, deeply explore aspects of friendship.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because, like a lot of models of counselling say you can't love someone else until you love yourself. But actually, other models would say you only learn how to love yourself through loving another. So it's paradoxes.
But we're constantly on a moment by moment basis reflecting on ourselves and the other. So we may be in a place where we need to withdraw to ourselves, and all the time we may need assistance to extend that self to the love of the other. So I can't see it as a static position, I just see it as a movement.
What was the thing about like circles of association? So you have like the love of your family, and then your love of your like village, and then your love of your country, right? So you're in order to. This is a popular theory of like international thinking about international like policies. So you have like, in order to be a good internationalist, you have to be a good nationalist first, because you have to expand the circles of your experience. So is this the first one? The first circle is you love, and then it's your family.
It's funny that you should say that, because I hate the idea that you can't love other people if you don't learn to love yourself.
Yeah.
It sounds like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like if you don't have basic things, you can't have other nice things at all. And so it's funny that you've also said that, because it gives you the sense of like you have to progress through these like stages before you can have nice things.
I wonder to what extent the quality of love that can be given to somebody else is less if we don't love ourselves. I think that for me the idea of giving and receiving and being, in order to give something that has any value, we need to have received it first. Now, receiving can be caring for ourselves, or it can be very selfish. And that will create a vibration of what we give to others, which is going to be very different depending on which it's what. But if we give to ourselves in a nurturing way, if we give to ourselves at all levels, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, then isn't it that what we'll share with others will be richer? the care we give to others will be richer. And perhaps from that, the love we give to others will be richer.
I think we would recognise the difference between the narcissistic self-love and what you're talking about. And you must surely it's founded on and more part of the love of the life we've had. And that the forgiveness of ourselves within that.
I was reading the story of Narcissus this week, and the one thing that really stood out to me is when he's looking at his reflection in the water, he's devastated that when he reaches out, he can't grab it. And on that theme of like, what is a bad self-love, it's interesting to visualize it as it's when you look at the person you're not as opposed to the person you are, and you try and grasp that reflection in the mirror that doesn't really exist. And I thought that was really sad.
Yeah, that's why narcissistic. I mean, the psychoanalytic model of narcissism. It's about a degree of brittleness or fragility as self, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's several stories, aren't there? There's one that Narcissus is the product of rape and is inherently damaged already. In that sense. Damaged.
Well, what of the offspring in the Greek myths were?
I have noticed, I've not got cultural comparisons to make, but for example, there's I know a terrific artist. He does really wonderful oil paintings, and I saw him the other week. I told him, your work's really, really beautiful, and he really struggled with hearing a compliment. And he just said, just don't, please don't. You can say anything, but it makes me so uncomfortable. And that's not the first time I've heard it. And I mean, there's some interesting PTSD, complex PTSD work, where there's a mnemonic, and I remember going through the mnemonic and finding there's like some one, remember, right, being triggered, having an emotional flashback. This, I am not my emotional flashback. That's a memory that's happening. 2, think about something constructive that you're going to do today, whether it's washing the dishes and complete that. 3, wisdom, just let the feelings be. 4, do something for yourself. Just for you, do something nice for yourself. And that was the one that really sort of was a curveball for me. I went, what? Because it was much easier to do something nice for somebody else. And I think that's not that uncommon from when I became aware of it to over time. I've noticed these moments where people are struggling with compliments, struggling with self-image. Agape. This was the Greek English lexicon but I struggled through it to pull out some of the concise associations that are written down. So here there are a number of pre-Christian references. For example, Homer's Odyssey. So it's associated with to greet with affection. In tragedy, to show only show affection for the dead. To be regarded with affection, to generally love, to be fond of, prize, desire, to be well pleased, contented, the highest form of love, charity, and the love for God, of God for humans and for humans, for humans for God. And this is the Henry George Liddell Greek English lexicon. So there's layers to this. And that made me think of a palimpsest. You know what a palimpsest is? In textual studies, a palimpsest is a manuscript page, either from a scroll or a book, from which the text has been scraped or washed off in preparation for reuse in the form of another document. So you know how certain paintings they found, they painted, a different painting was on this beforehand. This is the same with manuscripts too. And I see that with language a lot. I think Dr. Johnson said language is as mutable as a cloud. So with all these layering, it takes me back to the complexity of words and the fact that words exist over centuries and millennia. Has anybody heard the phrase "eat, drink, and be merry"? Well, this is reputedly from the Gilgamesh epic. Yeah, it was one of the oldest written stories we have. So yeah, that's still floating on the tips of people's tongues. Now, here, Professors Robert F. Cochran and Zachary R. Callow suggest love as a foundation of law. And in their book, they offer it as a resource for citing contemporary legal theory and for thinking anew about concrete problems within law. Law grounded in agape offers the possibility of more fully encouraging human flourishing in relationship and community than the theories that have dominated legal discourse in recent decades. Agape, as understood today, has its source in Christian tradition, but we believe it offers a vision for law that will be of interest to those from other traditions as well, both because they are likely to an analogous sources of value and because agape presents an inherently attractive foundation for law. In the ancient world, agape was seldom used and colourless word analogous to the English word like. And I've highlighted that in blue to remind me to say, I'm not entirely convinced that the everyday is colourless. I'm not so ready to dismiss that when it was used in the previous to the traditions in the Christian writings, that it wasn't fully appreciative of the amazingness of life. That's personal. That's my speculation. And brings us to philia, friendly affection. In Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, philia is commonly associated with love as friendship or affection. Its converse is phobia, which is associated with fear or aversion. Friendship, philia, love, feeling, beloved, friend, philos. Philia is discussed at length in books 8 to 9, while friendship is the best English rendering, it lacks a cognate verb, and love has to be used. Aristotle's discussion reflects the fact that philia has a wider range than friendship normally has. So philia includes love of members of family for each other. It includes the favourable attitudes of business partners and associates and fellow citizens for each other. It includes the attitude of philoi towards each other is different from what we might expect. In the best kind of friendship, one virtuous person admires the other's objective merits. So it's a non-egotistical appreciation that's and so digging into Aristotle and Plato, though Aristotle gave a marginal role to Eros in his ethical writings, philia occupies 2 books of the Nicomachean Ethics and fosters community in the politics, possibly those concentric circles. Appreciating why love in its various forms mattered to Plato and Aristotle emphasizes their focus on a question with a practical orientation. How ought we to live? I like that grounding to the use of the words. The aim was to develop a character that is oriented towards certain values as objects of desire and love, towards certain persons as seen as worthy of goodwill and concern. Plato and Aristotle supposed that it is not enough to reflect on laws and regulations without thinking about how citizens are disposed to one another, such that they are capable of living together in a political community. This is why friendship is of greater concern to the legislative than justice. And that really grabbed my attention. Bring in Socrates as well. Love mitigates egoism in their ethics. Such reflection is possible in part because of how eros and philia are conceived, not primarily as emotions upon which we cannot exercise control and agency, but as phenomena that involve affective appraisal of their objects, a cognitive component that is deeply implicated in our perception of value. Love is a practice whose ideal mode of expression requires work. Indeed, for Socrates, there is an art of love, something to which he laid claim despite his characteristic disavowal of knowledge. I really think the emotions are a part of intelligence, and the separating feelings out from intellectual work, I think, strands us from being able to be aware of a whole lot of really important, complex realities in the world that we have no other way of experiencing otherwise or expressing. Does anybody recognise that picture of Socrates?
I was going to ask you how you got the picture.
That's the philosopher's football match.
Oh.
It's Monty Python.
Yes. It definitely had a Pythoness feel.
Greece by Germany. Biophilia, already mentioned. Love in nature, and there's a beautiful book, Biophilia, The Human Bond with Other Species, by E.O. Wilson. And Here's an excerpt. In a twist of my mind came three, and I was aware of the hard workings of the natural world beyond the periphery of the ordinary attention, where passions lose their meaning and history is in another dimension, without people, and great events pass without record or judgment. I was of no transient, of no consequence in this familiar yet deeply alien world that I had come to love. And I think that speaks of something that people are becoming increasingly alienated from. Going out into the countryside, I find my breathing changes, my whole being is changed to a state of comfort and a lack of boredom. I'm never bored in the countryside. And Francois Vemelselter talks about boredom as a harm. Increasingly, there's a recognition of environmental and ecological grief, where previous to Chris Kevorkian applying Ken Doka's work of disenfranchised grief, people were having serious physical and mental ailments because they had a real connection with, for example, she did a study on a pod of orca whales that had become stranded, and people were living out a strong connection with those. And to not acknowledge that compounds those griefs and causes them to become very toxic. So returns really strongly to the stuff you were talking about.
Talking about the difference between passing through the environment and having a relationship with it. Very few people have any relationship. The desertification of the city centre here, and the lack of green space, and the lack of opportunity to have an active engagement, to plant something, to grow something.
Yeah. Does anybody communicate with the birds?
You do.
I love whistling at birds. I love trying, having some interaction with other species, and people have said to me, people have cracked up because I walk along the road and I will engage with dogs before I will engage with humans. Partly because I had such a very strong connection growing up with the dog in our family was the most intelligent person, most together person. So yeah, the relationship and being bereft of that relationship is worrying. Arguably a cause of a great number of illnesses. Now we're moving on to Nicholas Lubin's work, where love is passion, and this was like crawling over broken glass for me. It's really is translated out. Here's a quote from somebody, Mark Foster at University of California. His writing style unfortunately conforms to the inelegance of that intellectual pedigree, which may be characterized as a relentless string of bloodless abstractions stitched together in the most pedantic German academic manner. The author has succeeded as few before him in rendering the subject opaque, remote, and boring.
Well, Judith Butler got prizes for bad writing, didn't she, before everyone thought she was wonderful.
I wonder whether it's because of the way he organised knowledge. He developed a system called Zettelkasten, where as he worked through knowledge, he would write down chunks of information on cards, index cards, and then file them into these large libraries of index cards, and then use them to bring together pieces of work. I think that might be part of the reason why his work is so fractured and convoluted to read. But it's also being translated out of German.
He wrote about systems, didn't he? Social systems. It was about an attempt to think of the, not ecology, I think that's the wrong word, but the system, the way in which we're intimately linked in with the system. That's what he's doing. I find it so interesting what you're describing there about the way he worked academically, which was precisely doing the opposite. You know, I was thinking maybe this is why he was so interested in this, because he couldn't get to it. It wouldn't work.
I'll take that right down context. Put it into the index.
It doesn't work like that.
He spent. This is what I've managed to get from his work on love as passion. We love, this is a quote, we love and suffer according to cultural imperatives. And he studied, he did basically analyse the discourse around the use of the word love, and strangely focused just on the literature of the 17th and 18th centuries, constructing an analysis from the medieval to now. The systemic analysis of love throughout the centuries, he suggests, reflects prevailing social codes, typically produced by the upper classes, and ultimately setting the semantics of the day, which is relatively unsurprising. Medieval love was founded on fantasy and passion. Nightly attention was focused on one particular woman, usually unattainable, who encompassed the highest ideals and the erotic wishes of the man. And the 17th century love attended to sexual enjoyment that was dominated by caution, reserve, and service, and found no room for individual development. The social reflexivity of the 18th century set the foundation for marriage as a viable institution for lasting love between people who were viewed as changeable and capable of personal development. And I'm sort of I've jumped a whole chunk of history because I'm now thinking about big paradigm shifts, and there's a big, for me, black hole in the medieval period. And I got really interested in this, partly because I started to discover lots of manuscripts and writers that had been overshadowed and hidden in history. And partly because I started realizing that there were these huge social projects initiated, shaping popular ideas of what relationships should be like, what individuals should be like, and how cultures should function. And that's what led me into being very interested in the troubadours and the troubarettes. And the troubadours, that word is more commonly known. These were composers and artists in the medieval period. And the Trouberites were female composers and artists of the period. And I brought these quotes to sort of show these huge cultural projects from William Paddon's The Voice of the Trouberites. The noble family was newly understood as a descent group constituted of fathers and sons, and daughters lost their traditional claim to an equal share with their brothers in their parents' property. So we're thinking about the 11th and 12th centuries. And I can't say that I'm going to be giving you much more than tastings into an area that deserves a proper scholarly analysis, a proper deep investigation, because I've not really managed to work out what's fact and fiction, or propaganda, or who's saying what about whom. But we do know that changes in laws were initiated in a period. At the same time, the Gregorian reform imposed stricter ethical standards on the nobility, and monogamy became established as the unquestioned rule of Western marriage. By most social indicators, women, especially elite women, were losing status, power, and visibility as the Middle Ages progressed. So this was very interesting as I visited the south of France, places like Narbonne and Lyon, and found, for example, in Lyon there's a cathedral above the city, and in it has an information plaque which commemorates how, in religious terms, women had been reaching equitable status in symbolic terms. Now that is unusual. I always, it's not consonant with the history of Christianity that I was aware of. And I started to look at what female composers there were, who was writing, and finding that there was a whole range of people who were philosophers, theologians, and writers and artists who just haven't made it to the modern curriculums. And that's where I'm really trying to excavate more. But the Trouberites were of particular interest. And in these traditions, the courtly love, or fin d'amour, is cited. Focusing on courtly love as an expressed in Occitan lyric in the Latin treatise De Amor by Andreas Capellanius, and in the French romances, Kelly stressed that the metaphorical vassalage of the lover signified service and fidelity, not domination, and that the lady entered a relation of mutuality, not subordination. Now, why am I saying this? In this paradigm, what I think is particularly interesting is the rise of love as choice, which is hugely politically contentious It, it, it was a polar, diametrically opposed to other political forces, which were really imposing themselves across the continent. Kelly pointed out that the partial harmony between courtly love and Christianity, which elevated passionate love by purging up sexuality, although she did not take seriously the claim that courtly love was asexual as well. Further, she argued that courtly love supported the male-dominated social order of feudalism, despite the conflict between sexual liberation in courtly love and patriarchal demand for female chastity, because it benefited men as courtly lovers while enabling them to inherit fiefs through their wives. Now, there seem big ructions in the south of France, particularly around the Cathar culture, and the Cathar culture was significantly associated with production of arts. Here's a quote from C.S. Lewis on courtly love. Everyone has heard of courtly love, and everyone knows that it appears quite suddenly at the end of the 11th century in Languedoc. The characteristic of the troubadour poetry have been repeatedly described, with the form which is lyrical and the style which is sophisticated and often orate or deliberately enigmatic. We need not concern ourselves. The sentiment, of course, is love, but love of a highly specialized sort, whose characteristics may be enumerated as humility, courtesy, adultery, and the religion of love. The lover is always abject. So this idea of monogamy is starting to show contrast, and that really was the political and religious party line. And the Cathar is a name attributed to these cultures. It was given, attributed from outside. They never called themselves Cathar. They were referred to themselves as the perfecti, and their aim was to perfect their being, really, through their cultural and religious practices. And I found this book. It's written by an author from a place called Carcassonne, which was right in the heart of the Cathar country. It is known that the perfect ones, that for the perfect ones, every carnal act indefinitely delayed salvation, but they did not impose continence on those who did not feel the desire or the power to keep it, nor did they make any difference between legal marriage and concubinage. One and the other were permitted to simple believers. Perhaps, like ancient Manichaeans, they even preferred concubinage to marriage, but it did not have the deceptive appearances of a sacrament. It did not subordinate the woman so much to the man. It was based on equal and shared love. And finally, it was more likely to be sterile. Up to the 1250 to 1260, the perfects avoided marriages, that is to say, to regulate, according to the law, the concubinages in fact. But when persecution had disorganized their church, they exhorted believers desirous of contracting marriage to take wives as good Christian women in order to avoid disagreements and indiscretions, which would have been very dangerous. So really, it's hard. There are conflicting and different accounts going on about these cultural elements. But what I'm interested in again is this notion of equity between the genders and love by choice. Here's another quote which kind of shows how incendiary it was to the Roman Church. Marriage, as the Cathars and most of the southern heretics conceived it, was not sacramental and should only be based on love, consent, and reciprocal fidelity. For Pierre Clerc of Montagu, marriage is perfectly fulfilled from the moment of each of the contracting parties has pledged his faith to the other. The blessing given by the Roman Church, he adds, is nothing but a worthless ceremony invented by her to cover up sin, since husbands and wives fornicated without shame and without confession. So the church was introducing these pictures that all relationships should conform to, and these cultures held quite open alternative standards. So the thread that I'm taking really, I move forward to the Enlightenment period with Montesquieu, who was a philosopher and thinker in the 18th century. And I picked up on this, the nuances by reading Michael Sandel's work, Democracy's Discontent. And it kind of shows the cosmopolitan ethic and about love and the relationship of that love. So if I knew something useful to me but prejudicial to my family, I would reject it from my soul. If I knew something useful to my family but not my country, I would try to forget it. If I knew something useful to my country but prejudicial to Europe, or useful to Europe but prejudicial to mankind, humankind, I would regard it as a crime. For I am a human before I am a Frenchman, or rather, I am unnecessarily a man, while I am a Frenchman only by chance. So, I've been interested in reading and going through Montesquieu's work and seeing what I'm calling the difference between friend or love as a verb and friend or love as a noun. And there's this conflict that can occur between that loyalty over principle. So here he's talking about in his Mes Pensées, my thoughts, ordeal of civil wars. Don't tell me that in the middle of two different factions, I have only to keep my neutrality. For what are the means of staying sane when everybody else is mad, and keeping one's cool in the general frenzy? Moreover, I'm not isolated in society and cannot avoid taking part in all kinds of things with which I am connected. Besides, neutrality is not a prudent option, for I am quite sure of having enemies, but I'm not sure of having a friend. Thus, I must take sides. And he explores in different parts these competing values. Practically all virtues are a particular relationship between one man and another. For example, friendship, love a country, compassion are particular relationships, but justice is a general relationship. Now, all virtues that destroy this general relationship are not virtues. I said, I am friend to almost all minds and enemy to almost all hearts. He even issues shares a series of complex maxims with a friend who, and these kind of boggle me. They're a series of statements which ultimately amounts in him saying, I'm in love with friendship. And he makes it very clear in this passage, love is a verb on friendship. The Stoics used to say that the sage loves no one. They carry the reasoning so too far. I nonetheless believe it true that if men were perfectly virtuous, they would not have friends. We cannot attach ourselves to all our fellow citizens. We select a small number to whom we limit ourselves. We arrange a sort of contract for our common utility, which is merely a retrenchment of the one we have arranged with the entire society, and even seems, in a certain sense, to be detrimental to it. In fact, a truly virtuous person ought to be inclined to assist the most unknown person as his own friend. He has in his heart a commitment that does not need to be confirmed by promises, oaths, external testimony, and to limit him to a certain number of friends is to divert his heart from all other men. It is to separate him from the trunk which has attached him to the branches. That helps me think about principles. Well, again, love as a verb, as a doing thing, as a behavior, as versus to attaching my allegiances to some idea or person, regardless of what they do. And just this led me at the end to the work of bell hooks. In her book, All About Love, she says there are not many public discussions of love in our culture right now. At best, popular culture is one domain in which our longing for love is talked about. Movies, music, magazines, and books are the place where we turn to hear our yearnings for love expressed. Yet the talk is not the life-affirming discourse of the 60s and 70s that urged us to believe all you need is love. Nowadays, the most popular messages are those that declare the meaninglessness of love, its irrelevance. I had been evaluating my friendship relationship from the standpoint, this is where she talks about, I think, the conditions of love. I had been evaluating my relationship from a standpoint that emphasized growth rather than duty and obligation. I would have understood that abuse irreparably undermines bonds. All too often, women believe it is a sign of commitment, an expression of love to endure unkindness or cruelty, to forgive and forget. In actuality, when we love rightly, we know that the healthy, loving response to cruelty and abuse is putting ourselves out of harm's way. And I think that's, thanks for being so patient and letting me explore my, the love as choice, really, and love as a verb. And that is the final message that idea on love to my presentation. The difference between love and like. Dr. Martin Luther King, in his speech, his sermon, Loving Your Enemies, said, I think in this very passage, Jesus says, love your enemy. And it's significant that he does not say, like your enemy. Like is a sentimental something, an affectionate something. There are a lot of people that I find it difficult to like. I don't like what they do to me. I don't like what they say about me and other people. I don't like their attitudes. I don't like some of the things they're doing. I don't like them. So, thank you. I hope that was a bit of a romp for you.
It's felt really educative.
Did you think that Charles should have listened to the troubadours more and ended up with less marital strife?
Charles?
So he's apparently is a fairly senior person in our hierarchy.
Oh! Yes, I've never met him. Sorry, I've not been following. I like troubadours. I like the much of what I've read so far. I think I went into this world and sort of realised just how much I don't know. But by just that initial foray, realised how much cool stuff there is, how much really powerful philosophy there is. Like a lot of it, speaking of humanist perspectives that I identify with. Cheers.
There is the difference in that there's going to be a lot of people stick and take AI partners that don't disagree with them, remember their birthdays, their foibles, don't challenge them too much, and people will interpret that as them. That'd be what happens.
It's the film Her. Have you seen that? With about it's basically that, isn't it? Where he falls in love with the it's quite good.
I'm old, you see. I'm Stepford wife.
It's the same dynamic with loving for God, God or the godly nature or something. Yeah. It's not a new thing.
I was thinking, we started off talking so much about religion and God, and that link was there, in the way that you framed it anyway, and then we were led there. And I was thinking at the end, with Bell Hooks, I was thinking of the way that Marx talks about religion. Marx is often quoted as saying religion is the opium of the people, but people often forget that what he said immediately after that, religion is the opium of the people, but it's the sigh of an oppressed creature. It's the heart of a heartless world. It's the soul of a spiritless condition. And I was thinking that's what love is. That's what we yearn for, something that is we're deprived of, systematically deprived of. It's commodified. It's ruined. It's distorted. It's separated, it's channeled into certain kinds of relationships, but we desire it all the more. But
Bell Hooks was Buddhist.
well, no, maybe and Bell Hooks was Buddhist.
I think I was really drawn to research the word and the ideas because I'm not comfortable with the way the soul has been drained out. The taking of things that are so beautiful and making them debasing them. And media, a lot of media does that so tremendously well, and takes them apart, and then the things that are precious to people are given back to them in bits.
Yeah, that's
The scary technologies. I would love to know what people would recommend as reading for me to go away and further explore.
What the first thing that he mentioned was, I know he's left now, that memoir of the nun. That would have been that's not quite useful. I can't remember what it was called. But about charity and love and charity. The person that said,
It would have been full of recommendations.
yeah, I know, it's really annoying to me, but that's, I can't remember the name, but I thought that was probably really interesting, the writing about charity.
Well, I shall listen to the recording and glean